Hey everyone, Sweet Johnny Cage here, and today I'm interviewing a very special guest, Max Mraz, the developer of Ocean's Heart, a 2D top-down action RPG that released just under a month ago on Steam. Max is also the wow. Max is also the developer of smaller projects Yarntown, a 2D Bloodborne demake, and Hollow's Eve, which are available on the website itch.io. Max, thank you for taking the time to talk with me this evening.
Absolutely.
Cool. So, first off, how are you today?
Stellar. Been a good day. It's chill because we are at this moment all trapped inside our houses because of all the snow and
Yes,
pandemic outside. So
cool.
I have electricity, so I'm thankful.
Dude, Oklahoma and Texas are getting shattered
Oh.
right now with that, so I'm glad for that.
I'm
Awesome.
very thankful for the basics right now.
yeah, good old means to live. So I reviewed Ocean's Heart on my channel about a month ago. Shameless plug. But for the uninitiated out there, could you give us the elevator pitch of Ocean's Heart?
Yeah, so Ocean's Heart is a top-down 2D action RPG game in the vein of Zelda. It's in a lot of ways, if you like the 2D Zelda games, this is more of that. I miss those games and I wanted to make, very much something very much in that mold. So it's a game focused on exploration where you play a young woman searching for her dad and best friend who were involved in a pirate conspiracy, and she goes out on an adventure, also gets wrapped up in that pirate conspiracy, and it's a pretty self-directed exploration of an archipelago, and you're finding monsters and you're finding ancient treasure, figuring out what these pirates are up to, fighting ghosts.
Cool.
All the good stuff.
Well, great. Now that we have sort of the basis for what our conversation is going to be about, I do want to talk about some more, I guess, personal questions, and then we'll get back to Ocean's Heart in a bit. So where are you from?
So I'm from California,
wow.
and I've been living in Ohio for going on about 20 years.
Oh, how'd you wind up there?
I've been in Ohio most of my life at this point.
How did you wind up in Ohio from California?
I was 7. I didn't have a lot of choice in the matter, but my parents had family on this side of the country, and
Gotcha.
California, this was the 90s, and it was getting expensive, and there's constant wildfires now, and
oh yeah,
yeah. So they just wanted to raise us back more closer to where they were from and closer to family.
Gotcha. If you don't mind my asking, how old are you?
I am 28. Yeah.
Are you?
That sounds right. Yeah. I'm 28.
Okay, cool.
I was trying to remember if I had just my birthday was in October, and I was like, did I turn 28 then, or was I 28 before that?
You know, it's funny. I'm 32, and I say it with the same hesitation because I have started to forget. And I always have to do math to really what year are we in? When was I born? I always have to do that now.
My issue is I could try to do that math, and there's less likelihood of me doing the math correctly than there is just trying to remember what I turned last birthday.
Did you go to school for game development?
Absolutely not. I went to, well, what do you mean school? I didn't. So I dropped out. I was in college for a number of things.
Okay.
And then dropped out before I could finish any particular one of them. I had a scholar. So I've always been into art, and I went to my final years of high school. I went to an arts-based school. So I was doing a lot of self-directed art projects with paintings or murals, or producing albums, doing a lot of performing a lot of music, putting on shows. And there is no money to go to college for that kind of thing, so I got an engineering scholarship.
Okay.
So I went to did engineering classes for the first few years that were pretty general. It was a STEM scholarship. And when I started to specialize, I went to a community college for years. Started to specialize, went to at Ohio State. I was like, okay, cool. I will do architecture, because that's really cool. And I did that for a semester or two, and they were like, that's not engineering. And I was like, yeah, it is. It's the School of Architecture is part of the College of Engineering.
Right.
And the scholarship people were like, look, we have the money, so if I say it's not engineering, it's not. So I switched to forestry for a little bit, and they did the same thing, and they're like, trees aren't science. And I was like, what? So I did civil engineering for a little bit, and then I dropped out. I had to I had to take care of some health issues with some people that I was and never went back. So
wow.
Wandered around the country, hitchhiked around, like dropped out of school for a while, did some odd jobs, hitchhiked around the continent for a while,
Really?
did odder jobs. Eventually came back to Ohio.
You hitchhiked around the country.
Bunch of different things since then. Then in like 2017, I was building a RetroPie console because I was like, yo, I want to play Final Fantasy Tactics on my TV. Like I'm old now. I can't see my Game Boy Advance anymore. It's not backlit. I had to remedy this. And the this engine called Solaris was like preloaded on the RetroPie.
Mm-hmm.
And it like had a couple Zelda fan games. And I was like, well, this is really cool. And I looked into it. I'm like, you can just make your own game that you can play on your own TV. I should learn to code. So I started teaching myself to code to make a video game. And I'm like, what better way to learn to code than to just make the video game? And started making Ocean's Heart.
Wow, cool. That's you answered a bunch of questions I had for a little later.
It's a whole narrative.
How you hitchhiked around the country?
Mm-hmm.
How did that work?
So there was this there was in Oregon every year there's the World Treehouse Conference where a bunch of the like foremost treehouse developers all get together at Michael Garnier's Out and About Tree Sort and talk about like technology and advancements in the field. And there's like presentations about like canopy biology. I was like helping out this dude. So I didn't have any money. So I like made a deal that I would like, be like part of the staff and like work there in exchange for being allowed to go there. Mm-hmm. And they let me pitch a tent out in the woods and sleep at the, just out there. And so I was helping this canopy biologist, I guess you would call him, who like did a bunch of research on the biology of the canopies in Costa Rica. And he's like, we're hanging up. He had built this little like, it's sort of like an electric wheelchair, but for zip lines instead of the ground. And like it goes back and forth. And I was helping him like build that and stuff. And anyway, so my plan after that, I was like, obviously I'm gonna meet some cool people there. I'm just gonna hope that leads to something. And so there were these I had made friends with these hippies and I was going to go back to their commune with them. And they were like, cool, we're going to go back to the town, because this was like outside Cave Junction, Oregon.
Right.
And they're like, we're going to go back to the town. We got to pick up some groceries, meet us there. So these dudes I was talking with who like, they were just, they weren't like in the treehouse field, but like, they were just like, treehouse thing, that sounds cool. I think one of the dudes, his wife had sort of gotten the two of them tickets for his birthday, and they were like, go do this will be fun. And I was, playing music around the campfire with them. So they were like, oh, you're looking for some hippies? Like, get you a ride. Let me find you the hippies. And we couldn't find them. So they just took me back to Portland with them. And I like lived with them. So they're like family at this point now.
Right.
So I like lived with them for like 6 months and was like doing construction and like hang out with them and playing music. And eventually I was like, all right, time for me to like, this has been great, but I'm just like kind of like bumming on your couch. Like,
right.
It's time for me to go. So I hitchhiked down the coast and met a bunch of people and ended up in Mexico for a while. Then eventually like ran, the like $2,000 or whatever I saved up eventually ran out after, year. And I like ended up hitchhiking back because the hostel that I was staying at and working with, it was sort of like, it wasn't really where I wanted to end up being stuck at for months. Right. Anyway, so I ended up being sort of like an au pair or a nanny, and that got me back to the States for a while. And this long haul trucker picked me up and took me back to Tennessee, and I got back to Ohio. And anyway,
wow.
Then then I moved. Like, I've always had a great support network though, because I had like lots of friends, and I ended up moving back in with my family and getting things figured back out. Anyway, now I make video games.
That's really cool. I had a former coworker who he's a sort of like a fitness nut, and he hiked from like the Mexico-California border up to Vancouver. There's like a name for that trail. And he did it over, yeah, exactly. He did it over like a few months, and just totally off the grid, awesome. Just walking between 3 countries.
Oh my gosh, yeah. My little sister's about to do the Appalachian Trail in
cool.
couple months. Yeah, I wish I could just drop everything for, the majority of a year and go on a walk. But I'm gonna do a few parts with her. I'm taking her down and gonna do a couple days, and then I'm gonna meet up with her part of the way. But
neat.
Yeah, that is. I haven't done any of the Pacific Crest Trail, but like that's a really pretty. Oh my gosh, got to be so pretty to go do that.
Yeah, I stalk his Facebook pictures every once in a while just to.
Oh, you gotta.
Yeah. Well, cool. I really appreciate the backstory that sort of informs the exploration motif of Ocean's Heart a lot. So yeah, that's really good to know. What was your first video game system growing up as a kid, if any?
So that was a so sort of like it was sort of a two-stage thing. So like the first video game system that I owned was a Game Boy Color. I remember like I had to save up a bunch of money to get it. I think it was like I had to save up $20 as a like an 8 or 9 year old, which is like, where's an 8 or 9 year old get money? Right. Where's a 9-year-old get money? So I like eventually saved it up, and like it was like my dad's friend's kid was going off to college and was like, he was going to sell me his Game Boy Color for $20. So that was that. And then I, did like Pokemon and Oracle of Season. This is my first Zelda game. I think he gave me Tetris with it, which God, I'm so bad at Tetris.
Oh, I played a lot of Tetris in high school. I had it on my TI-83 calculator.
Oh, nice.
That is part of the reason I almost didn't pass math, was I was too busy playing Tetris.
Tetris empirically is a very good game. It's very well designed. It's an amazing game. The music is fantastic. Oh yeah, empirically a phenomenal game. I'm so bad at it. I don't like it's just not my it feels like work to me. I'm like, I don't want to sort these shapes.
There's a game reviewer who goes by the name Matthew Matosis, and he does very long form. Yeah, okay. If you watch him, I'm almost positive he has a Tetris review on like why it is hands down the greatest game ever created. It's just so pure and simple, but it's so good.
I'll have to watch that. Yeah, I've watched a number of his videos. I really like. I love long form video essays on YouTube.
Yeah, same. Yeah,
and I love falling asleep to him. I'm not
Dude, I was just gonna say that. It's the brogue. It's the Irish brogue, and him just ranting about Dark Souls. It's just like puts me right out. Or
like the other writing on games, that Scottish guy who goes about Dark Souls for a while.
Oh, I don't think
I love his videos too. Yeah, another fantastic accent that'll talk about Dark Souls for a while, and it's just I feel like I don't know if every other person if every other country like loves accents as much as Americans do, but we love people with accents.
It's because ours are so terrible.
Living in what is like those poor people don't have power right now, but Amarillo,
right.
Amarillo. That was like, oh, we're butchering it. We're butchering talking.
I'm from Long Island, so we have crazy accents that everybody makes fun of. So your first game system was a Game Boy Color.
Yes. Although other thing is, so when I moved to Ohio when it must have been 7 or 8, we started going down to my mom's house in Tennessee for Christmas. Mm-hmm. And so like, once a year we'd go down to Tennessee for like a week. And my mom's younger brother, my uncle, had a Super Nintendo when he was for some reason it was at my grandma's house.
Sure.
And it had NBA Jam 1997 or something, and Earthbound. So wow. I played the two, I like didn't really, this was before I really like, I was probably like 7, 8, 9 and didn't really like understand game literacy was at a 0. These were the first video games I ever played. And I remember trying to play Earthbound is surprisingly inscrutable.
Yeah. It's weird.
It's weird. Like even looking back at it, it's like there was a section, so I never got to, because what we would do is, once a year, I'd play it for maybe a week.
Right.
And, this would just keep going on. So I think over the course of 3 or 4 years, I made it to 4 side. And just
I've never actually beaten Earthbound, believe it or not. I've never beaten it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely got problems by modern standards, but for me, because of this being this was in a lot of ways my very first formative game experience, so it's got crazy nostalgia for me of not only is it my first video game experience, but it's wrapped up with Christmas and going to my grandma's house, so it's got all of that in there for me. So it's really that I just got a deep love for it because it was just holds, the first video game you play has that place.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a weird one to play first because it has a lot of there's one section where to get to a mandatory level, this is not a side content thing. There is a single NPC that tells you to go to a specific behind a waterfall and then wait 5 minutes. And this is literally, you just can't press the controller for 5 minutes.
Like Simon's Quest, just sitting at the wall waiting for the tornado.
Is that what? I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, in Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, everybody in it's unclear if the game was mistranslated or if everyone in the town is lying to you. So it's a very arcane, obtuse game that just does not explain anything to you. And one of the puzzle solutions is once you get an item, you go to a wall and just crouch in front of it for, it's not 5 minutes, it's 30 full, really long seconds. And then eventually a tornado comes and picks you up and brings you somewhere else. But it's how the hell would anybody know to do this?
Right? Yeah, that sort of arcane design is, I love it and I hate it. Yeah. Because it's bad. That is,
it's objectively not good.
Yeah, what are you trying to do? But on the other hand, it's so weird that it adds so much mystery. Yeah. Even if you just do that once in the game, I think I read, there was some article that I saw on Twitter that I read yesterday, something about talking about, I think it was rating the Legends of the Ocarina of Time dungeons by mystery level or something. I had it on when I was making lunch.
That's a BuzzFeed quiz right there.
Yeah. Which Ocarina of Time dungeon are you by your level of mystique? Your personal je ne sais quoi. But the one thing it mentioned was that the when you have these weird inexplicably kind of bad design things, if you do that once, it opens up sort of the possibility space of that could be anywhere then.
Right.
If crouching in front of a wall in one area in Castlevania causes a tornado to come take you somewhere, what does that mean about all the other walls? What does that mean about tornado? Could tornadoes happen anywhere? What other forces of nature might oblige to take me to secret areas? It's just the weirdness of that and the inexplicability sort of forces you to engage with it on this probability space level that I think is really cool.
What was the most mysterious dungeon?
Maybe
Shadow Temple?
I want to say, well, the Shadow Temple is lore wise, because the Shadow Temple lore wise is the most mysterious. You're what the fuck were they doing?
There's a lot of murder going on in this place.
There's way more murder than I was led to believe by the marketing campaign.
Right.
But then as far as the level design, it's kind of pretty straightforward. It's sort of a roller coaster of death and terror, which, hey, that's fun. Whereas I think one of the things they mentioned was the Dodongo's cavern. The fact that you have to drop bombs into the eyeballs of the giant Dodongo skull. They don't have a particular tell that's what you have to do. There's just a sign that tells you to do it.
Is there even that?
Yeah, it says giant Dodongo, when it sees red, the path forward will open. Which means,
and then there's pits in the bridge above it for you to signify you need to drop here. Okay.
Yeah, and you just drop bombs down right into its eyeballs and they light up red. And it's sort of the fact that like this is not a repeating mechanic.
Sure.
Just this is a weird one-off thing that's sort of like the mystery of it adds to the mystery of everything. And I thought that was a really incisive analysis of like the way that by not answering by not answering questions and by not explaining yourself, you can invite the player to engage with your game on a much deeper level. Which I think is a really fun place to explore.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm going to ask you to send me that. I'd like to listen to that. Did you ever play?
Thankfully, YouTube has a history because I'm like, oh, how did I find that?
Yeah. Did you ever play a game called Illusion of Gaia?
No, I've heard of it.
Wow. I haven't played Ocean's Heart. I was sort of convinced that you had. Man, that's funny. That's almost like a case of parallel thinking. Not that there's like a lot of similarities or anything. It's not like, I don't need to go that far with it, but
it's not the Ocean Horn situation where
I
accidentally gave my game a name that was already a game, basically.
Yeah. When I was doing a little bit of research for this, I mean, I did a lot of research for this, but I don't know why I downplayed that, but I heard you say that was a game that you knew about, but it was so old that you're like, who cares? And then they re-released it.
Yes. Yeah. I don't remember who I was talking to. Yeah, that was bad timing on my part.
So Illusion of Gaia is a SNES RPG made by Quintet, and they made ActRaiser, Terranigma, Soul Blazer, and eventually got either bought by Square or absorbed, something like that. Enix published it, so I know that much. But it's about a kid whose dad goes missing at the Tower of Babel, which is like a biblical thing, and then it takes place in quote unquote the real world. Like, you go to ruins of things in real mythology. So you go to the sunken city of Mu, you go to the Great Pyramid of Giza, you go to the Tower of Babel, you go to different places, but it's all like a lot of seafaring sort of nations. And you start off in a place called South Cape, and it's on the water, it has a dock, and then you sort of travel around the world. And when I got to Oakhaven in Ocean's Heart, the bustling nature of that city was really reminiscent of a city in that game called Euro, it's Europe, literally, just shortened. But it's like, it's an SNES city, so it couldn't get too crazy. But it had like a lot of fruit stands and stalls, and it had a big palace with a dark mystery and like weird things like that. So I was really curious if you had played that, but okay.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
No.
All right, well, the interview's over. I'll see you later.
You're clearly lying to me that you ripped off Terranigma or Gaia.
Right.
No, actually, that's funny. A lot of the influence for Oakhaven in particular, besides just like, I mean, I knew I wanted sort of that like an older, leafy, sort of longer established city that had tied in more to the like more ancient lore in Ocean's Heart, but like aesthetically, I was trying to emulate the feel of that city in The Witcher.
God.
Norfolk, Roanoke,
hang on. Novigrad?
Novigrad.
Yeah. It's like the main city. I really liked how in The Witcher that city changed based on your decisions, whether either burning mages or not, which is pretty cool.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, like depending on...
I only played once, so...
Depending on how you help Triss, and like let the mages escape or not, I'm almost positive certain things change.
Okay, yeah, no, I'm sure they do, because that's that game's bread and butter and what it does so well and why it's such a, like landmark of a game.
Yeah. Well, cool. So what sort of games do you play now, if any?
Yeah, so I mean, I don't play as many as I would maybe like to because, I mean, time, sure. I work a full-time job and then make a video game on the side, which is a big mouthful of hobby. Plus, like, I write music and I see friends or talk to them online or whatever. And then, like games can be kind of expensive, honestly. But what I'm playing at the moment is I love Hitman so
Okay.
much. I haven't gotten the third one yet because my dog had surgery the other month and
Oh,
money's tight. But
I hope everything's
so
okay.
I bought two. I bought like a copy of two used about a year ago. Yeah, it was about a year ago because I was super duper sick at the beginning of the pandemic for some reason. Um,
Do you think you had COVID?
I mean, I want to say yes because I had all the symptoms, but at the same time, like I talked to so many people who were like, "Oh, I definitely had it,"
Right,
and I'm
right,
like,
right. My
and they're
dad's that
like,
way.
yeah, they're like, "Oh, well, I like didn't feel very good for a couple days." I'm like, I had a really runny nose, and I'm like,
I had this
buddy,
itch and it just wouldn't go away for a week, so I
it was
definitely
probably yeah.
had it.
I mean, yeah, but I was super duper sick for a week, and like at the beginning of it, I had just bought two video games, which is really for I bought Sekiro and Hitman 2.
Okay.
Which was great because then I was like on the couch for a week. Um, so I got and then I bought the last time there was a Hitman sale, I got the first level. So I've just been playing the first two Hitman games over and over, and I love those games so much.
Yeah,
Um,
I played the demo for the first one, like the
yeah,
first one on
and
PS4.
Sapienza.
Yeah, it was like the cruise ship level or something like that.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, so you got that was just the first that was just the tutorial of the demo that
Oh,
they
nice.
the demo I got it too. I like there was like a weekend where that was like a free download of the of one level.
Yes.
And this was probably like 2017 or 2018.
Mhm.
Well no, it'd be 2016 because that's the year it came out. But yeah, it was like it gave you there's a two different tutorial levels which is like this fake cruise ship, and then there's like an airplane place, and then it puts you in the first actual level,
Oh, I
which
guess I
is
never
this
got that far.
yeah, this giant town on the coast of Italy, which is a phenomenal level.
Cool.
Um,
Okay, I never got that far.
mhm. It's a game that like it. I mean, I always hesitate to recommend games to people who I don't know because like there's so many different kinds of games, and like
Sure.
you're not like I don't particularly care for shooters, but like for me, it is like one of my dream games. Like it's just so reactive and I don't mean fiddly in a bad way, but you can fiddle around with so many
Right.
things. There's just like hundreds of different knobs to pull and levers to push, and they all bump against each other. And it is very aware of the slapstick nature of a deadpan assassin, like killing people in absurd ways. You know, like it's 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 so it's like Leslie Nielsen in Airplane.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Naked Gun.
is that the actor's name?
Yeah, Leslie Nielsen. Yep.
Okay, cool. I'm like, wait, is that a politician? Whatever. Anyway, yeah. Like it just plays it so deadpan, and
Yeah.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
But other games I love, obviously I love Zelda. You can, you know, if you've seen a picture of Ocean's Heart, you're like, oh, this is a Zelda game, right?
Right.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I love those and I want more of them. And then Hollow Knight is probably one of my other favorite games that I've
Still haven't
been
gotten to that.
holding off and going back to.
I still haven't gotten
Yeah,
to Hollow Knight.
I feel like that's one of those that I'll more universally recommend than Hitman. Like Hitman is probably not for everyone.
Sure.
Hollow Knight is really hard, but if you're good with like hard video, like anybody, like if you enjoyed Dark Souls or Bloodborne, which are really popular games,
Right.
then I feel like give Hollow Knight, you know, it's Hollow Knight's not super expensive and it is amazing.
So, in a previous interview, you had mentioned that your sister recommended that you play Bloodborne, which is how you sort
Yes.
of got inspired to do Yarntown. And
Mhm.
then after that, she said, okay, now you have to play Dark Souls. Like, the floodgates are open. Like, you've got to do this. Have you finished Dark Souls?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, she definitely pressured me into that. Well, she bought me Dark Souls.
That's
So
how
I
it
didn't
goes. I've
have
bought
an
it for many
excuse.
people.
Yeah. When the Switch remaster came out, she got it for me. And for her too, because she also eventually got a Switch, so we share it. But yeah, I did finish it. I don't know if I would have finished it if it weren't for her. Bloodborne, like once I got into it, I was into it and I loved it. Dark Souls is a lot rougher. I feel like
Yeah.
it has some of the best level design, like on a macroscopic scale, that I've ever seen in a game. And then like some of the most frustrating decisions I've ever come across either. On top of just generally being a bit janky.
Yeah, I'm actually replaying Dark Souls 1 right now to do a series of walkthroughs because I had spent a lot of time with Demon Souls Remake back in November and December doing a lot of work for that on my channel. And then I figured Souls games just have this like really weird property to them where like once you finish playing them, you don't want to play anything else unless it's like it. Like it's one of those games where like you wish you could forget it and then play it again. Yeah. Because it's just like that first time through, like when you jump on an elevator and suddenly you're back in Firelink Shrine, you're like, oh my god, I haven't seen this place in 10 hours. I thought I was on the other side of the world, but I was just underneath it the whole time. Like, those sorts of just pieces of magic, like it's something you can't recreate.
They do that so well.
Yeah.
And I think like I've also been playing Sekiro the past couple days.
Okay.
I like saw some YouTube video about the lore that I fell asleep watching, and I was like, I don't know, play that again.
It's much more straightforward than Souls games.
It is, yeah. The level design there is nothing to write home about. It's pretty, it's fun to move around in.
Yeah,
but
it's a playground.
I feel like it does a similar thing where like the combat is so. What my current take on Sekiro is that the combat is maybe the best like melee combat in any game ever. And it's a shame it only lets you do it for 5 seconds at a time before either killing you or killing the enemy.
Right. It's like, a rhythm game. That's how I look at it. It's a rhythm game.
Yeah. I think that's a fun way to look at it.
Yeah.
And just like I was playing the other night. I was like the other thing too is you can't be under leveled for something because you can't level up in the game. Like,
right.
There's a couple, like every, there's like 3 or 4, like maybe, I don't know, maybe there's like a half dozen bosses that'll increase your attack power. But like, other than that, like pretty much like you just got to be able to beat a boss, and they all either one shot you or two shot you. And it's like, I'm having so much fun with this combat system. Let me do it for longer. I don't want to play for 15 seconds and then have to redo a stealth section.
Yeah. They just recently patched in, not necessarily a boss rush mode, but like you can refight bosses. So
yes,
there's that.
I did that last night. I beat Genichiro on this run, and I was like, sweet. I might not play anymore. I might just leave this here so I can refight Genichiro whenever I want, because he's the best boss in the game in my opinion, for sure, because like he embodies what it is good at.
Have you beaten it?
No. So I've played it through. This is my second time picking it up. The first time I made it to, I did like the pretty, I guess like the normal ending where you don't betray Kuro, but you haven't figured out the severance thing, because I don't know how to do that.
Oh, so you have finished the game though?
No, I made it to Ishin and couldn't fucking beat him because he's too damn hard.
Okay, that's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah,
I didn't want to spoil that for you.
I tried to beat him for a couple days, and I'm like, why am I doing this? This is the final boss. It's not fun. I battle him for like 30 seconds at a time, get destroyed in one hit, and then I gotta fight Genichiro again, and it's just like, please just do 30% less damage or something. And like, let me make 3 mistakes instead of 1 or 2. I mean, I feel like
a walkthrough for it. It's one of my most watched videos. Is how to beat that fucking boss.
I believe it. Because like, I feel like I want it to be the exact same game with like 10 degrees of difference.
Right.
But just like be just slightly nicer to me.
Yeah, it's one of those games where like once, I don't know, it's like once it clicks, it gets a lot easier, and like there are degrees at which that happens. Like there's the tutorial boss, which oddly enough is another one of like the most popular videos on my channel, is like how to beat the first mini boss, which just teaches you, it's the parry tutorial.
Yeah.
And so like once you get that down, you can sort of take any enemy. But then once you get to weird shit like the guardian ape and Gyobu on a horse, and you're just like, what the fuck is anything? What is happening? Like, right. You got to like figure out how to contend with the weirdness, and then once you get that, it's just it's so good. So growing up, I played a lot of Street Fighter Third Strike, which has a parry system, and it's a very short frame window to parry things, and you basically just press forward or down once the attack is coming towards you, and then as long as you're within the window, you get a parry. So like. You have to master that mechanic in order to become good at Street Fighter 3. So having done that, played a lot of rhythm games growing up, I actually found Sekiro like not necessarily easy, but like once I figured out the parry timing, the whole game was just cake until Ishin, and then they just kicked my ass for a few hours before I beat him. But I know what you mean.
Yeah. For me, like well, one thing too, I will say, in my defense, this is a theory I have, because I feel like. The last couple times I've been playing, I'm like, I can get the parries most of the time, but sometimes I don't know. I guess my timing, I'm just not quite fast enough. Before I got on this call, I was doing a run in Hitman. And so in Sekiro, parry is L1.
Right.
And in Hitman, the quote unquote sprint button, which is the light jog button, because that's a slow game. Is also L1. And I was trying to like jog through this party, and I noticed he just kept stopping as I held down the button, and I'm like, is my fucking controller broken? Have I been playing Sekiro with a broken parry button this whole time?
Oh.
So that might be it. So I don't know.
Wow.
But still, like,
controller.
That doesn't change the fact that like General Nine Spears Ashina outside the Moonlit Tower, or whatever his fucking name is,
right,
will one-shot you.
Yes. Yeah, there are certain mini bosses that are harder than any other boss. Like the drunkard, Jinzo the drunkard, something like that.
Oh, yeah, something like that, yeah. I actually didn't find it to be that hard. It's always different for everybody, right?
Yes.
Except we can all agree the Guardian Ape is bullshit. And the rest of them are like, you have your own strengths.
There's actually a one of the I could talk about From Software games for hours, but one of the really nice things one of the really nice things about those games is that like you can do things in different ways, and like at the end of the day it's meaningless, but it's like if you kill in the second Guardian Ape fight, if you kill the Guardian Ape before you kill the mate cries, and like weird things happen like that. And in Dark Souls 2, one of the DLCs, if you kill the boss under a certain amount of time, or if you don't take any hits, he actually kills himself. Like he commits seppuku. And it's just like,
oh wow.
Yeah, it's like crazy shit like that. And it's just like nobody would ever know this unless they're really good at the game. And it's quite meaningless at the end of the day. It doesn't change anything. But it's just those little details, little magic.
Yeah. No, I love that kind of stuff too, because it shows like there's so excuse me. I had a hiccup. I get one hiccup at a time. It's weird. It shows that they're like so willing to let so much stuff go unnoticed by most people.
Yeah.
Like then that when you have, so like if you have, like if you're the main part of the game that everybody has to go through is say like that's like 30% of the game or whatever, or 80-90% of the game, just like the more stuff you have that is absolutely unnecessary and that most people won't find, the more like for the people who do find it, or if like say a normal playthrough, you'll come across like 1 out of 20 really hidden things.
Yeah.
It does that. What I keep talking about, like it opens up that possibility space of now the game is so much bigger.
Yes.
Like, going through an Uncharted game or some game like that, like there's nothing out there that you didn't see. Like you saw all the cool set pieces, and pretty much when you're done with the game, you're done with the game. Like you're sort of done thinking about it. Like you got everything out of it. But when you can just drop a single like, I'm sorry, what? Like this was in there?
Yeah.
If you like when you can drop, like if you can get a player to see one of those, then that like implies that there could be an infinite number of more of them. And the harder and harder the harder they are to find, the harder it is for me as the player to disprove the fact that like there aren't more of them out
Yeah.
there. And it like just adding in a few of these little things, like percentage wise, like in my mind, the percentage of size of which the game grow. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this like a sane person would. Like, like when if there's just a couple of these little things that I'm like, whoa, was so unexpected that you would put this in, like so much work for such a little thing. That implies that there could be so many more of them that are equally hard to find. There's no way I'd be able to find all of them. There is an infinite amount of content in this game now in my mind.
That's how I felt about Ocean's Heart. I kept.
Oh,
I beat the game missing several sub weapons and many heart containers, and yeah, I think I messaged you like 3 times. Like, where do I go for this? Where do I go for this? How do I get back to the demo area? I never found that. Yeah, it was. Yeah, I love that sort of stuff, and like going back and finding out. Like, I think you told me, like, oh, yeah, get the spear from the puzzle wood, and then something will show up at a dock. And it's just like, I thought I fully explored the puzzle wood. Like, there's more to this goddamn place. So, yeah.
It's a puzzle! Good!
I know. Yeah, so you nailed it. You definitely nailed that aspect of it, for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, the, like, what I was really going for there was, like, definitely that aspect of, like, the more that is, like, the more places where you can go down a seemingly unremarkable side path that you wouldn't expect there to be anything big, and there's a big area, the more times you can do that, the more exponentially the possibility space of the game grows in your mind. And also just like that feeling when you do, like, so my sister who made me become a Soulsborne person, she works for the metro parks in our city right now. And she back in November, she was like, I have a forest secret I want to show you. And I'm like, tell me more. And she's like, no, just come with me. So we drive out to there's this metro park, like, not weirdly, it's like city and county metro parks is like but this is like 2 counties over and like 8 cities over, when we've got this giant metro park way out in the hills, like in the foothills of the Appalachians. And she's like, yeah, my like manager down there showed me this really cool place. Just, I'm not telling you anything, just come with me. And like drove down there on like an afternoon in like late November. And like, she's like, it's somewhere out here. And we're like hiking, we're way off the trail, like hiking through these hills and ravines and through cliffs. And she's like, oh, here it is. And we like go through, there's this like tiny little crevasse where you can wedge between 2, giant cliffs, like giant boulders and cliffs. And like you come out on the other side, and it feels like when you enter the labyrinths in Breath of the Wild, like it's just these straight like tunnels, not like tunnels, but like
yes, I know what you mean.
Canyons, that like branch off and like are right, and it felt like a labyrinth. And she just like that feeling of when you're, because that is not on a trail anywhere. There's no like trail that takes you to that. There's probably like a half dozen people that know about that. Like that kind of feeling is just like one of my favorites when you're just out in the woods hiking or exploring, and you come across something really cool. When someone's like, I heard there's a cool thing, why don't you go check it out? And you just got to go through a huge hassle, but then it's a huge thing. I love that feeling. So that's like, I think wanting to emulate that and just like get that experience into a game was probably one of my biggest goals when it came to why I wanted to make a game. To just like try to translate that mood and like that vibe into a game.
So there's a parallel here. I'm not sure if it's Miyamoto or Aonuma, but one of them said that when they were a kid, they like hung out in the woods a lot and just sort of got lost. And then that's sort of how they got the idea for The Legend of Zelda. And I just thought that was such an interesting... You had sort of told this story in another interview. And once I heard that, that's the first thing I thought of. And it's just sort of, I don't know, an axiom for like, get out of your house and go somewhere. And like, go explore. Like you're going to find inspiration somewhere.
Yeah. That was like, I think that's, or at least in my mind, that's one of like the most impactful Miyamoto quotes is, yeah, he was explaining how he got the idea for Breath of the Wild, or for Zelda.
Yeah, just like Zelda 1.
Yeah, the original Legend of Zelda was just like, I was a kid, I went exploring, I found a cave, I liked that.
Yes,
here's a video game.
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, exactly. And like I'm super thankful that I like have been able to do pretty similar things in my life. Of like I'm able to get out into nature. Like I live in a place where it's pretty easy to get out far away. Like the Appalachian Mountains aren't more than like 3-4 hours away. Like you can go on a day trip and go into do some pretty cool hikes. Like that's all available. And just like, I'm so glad I get to do that. And I feel like I get exactly what he was talking about. I'm like, yeah. I found a cave too. You're right.
So did you ever find out what that was? Like
that was just a natural, what my sister took me to see was just a natural rock formation. It was just just the way that the geology cleaved itself into big, hallways.
Cool.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is like a really terrible transition, but another like burning question I had for you was, I guess let me structure it this way. So you mentioned that you taught yourself to code. What was that experience like?
I mean, full of dumb questions. So I think making a video game honestly is a great way if you're going to teach yourself to code. Like it is a good way to do it.
Why is that?
Making a game the size of Ocean's Heart with a lot of the features of Ocean's Heart is not necessarily maybe the best way to do it. But in a lot of ways, like when you're programming a game as opposed to enterprise software, or whatever like a game has so many tangible elements. Like when you're when you want to code some logic for like, when you approach this door, if you have this key, it should open, like some pretty straightforward if then logic, like figuring out like, do doors have methods or whatever. Like, when you put that in, then you have a very tangible output of, oh, I can move a character to a door, I can open the door. And I think there's like, definitely there's, like your console line, like very basic programming things of like, program the logic of a bank, deposit $500 and see if this variable goes up 500, like that sort of thing. There's definitely a good place for that. And like teaching you the fundamentals of like what object-oriented programming is, or what functions are in function or whatever, like those are great for that. But for like having an application where you can see how all the different, maybe individual pieces come together to form a cohesive whole, I think games are good for that. But definitely making a big project, I have no idea how I finished Ocean's Heart. Like if anyone ever asks me like, oh, how do I, I'm looking to make a first game, I'm always like, start so small.
Build a room first.
Yes, like, and I mean, granted, to make a game like Ocean's Heart, you have to build a room first, but just like, oh man, it would have been great to have stopped a year in and started over. But like, finished a year in and started over on the foundation of that. Just like getting something done is really important. But yeah, so going in, like there were a lot of like, it was the engine I used, Solaris is great for, if you're going to make a Zelda like, fantastic. Probably a 2D Zelda like, probably the best engine because it's very much designed for that. If you're making similar games, it's also can be very powerful. But like going in, like I would be looking at code with literally not knowing what like a function is, or like what it meant. I'm like, what it meant for a class to have a method, or like very, very, very basic things like that. So like it was very much just blindly stumbling and writing a bunch of very dumb things for a long time. I
Right.
came across I was fixing a bug a couple weeks ago, and I came across some code that was like it was like very like a variable like handled equals true. If handled, then. And I'm like, what do you why is this? You said a very it's like what is this condition? This condition is always true. Um there's to this day very dumb, very bad code even in the code base because I had no idea what I was doing at the beginning.
It works though. It's a playable game. At the end of
It
the,
is,
it's a fully
yeah.
playable game. It's finishable. Um, you mentioned in another interview that you, either in high school or college, you had started on a Majora's Mask fan game.
Oh yeah.
Is that still something you want to work on? Or, I mean, what was that like? Like, what were you doing? Because modding N64 games is not easy.
Oh no, that is not what we're doing.
Like, what were you
No.
doing there?
I was making an RPG Maker game in like junior high,
Oh,
ninth
okay.
grade. Yeah. So I would that was just I mean, I was trying to force RPG Maker into being an action RPG, and it's
Mhm.
not. It doesn't do that. RPG Maker 2003 does not do action.
Does it currently? Did they ever change that?
I don't know. I think eventually they opened it up to allow scripting, so you
Okay.
could force it to do that, but it's still that's not what it's for.
Sure.
It's for making old Final Fantasy style games, like, and it is because it's so like drag and drop, point and click, easy to use. That the easier it is to do one thing, the harder it is to do everything else.
Right.
And it is very easy in that, at least in, I don't know, 2009 when I last played it, it was, very easy to make sort of, your classic top down, go at, now you're in a battle, it's turn based sort of thing.
Right.
But because it's so focused on making that, it just, if you wanted to make like a platformer, like, no way, man.
Sure.
And people do force it into that box, but at that point it's like, buddy, why?
Just use lunar magic.
Yeah, just you pick up any other engine, it'll do that. You're working 3 times as hard to do something that anything else would be easier with.
Did you ever do any ROM hacking or anything before you started like building games?
No. So RPG Maker was the first thing I picked up back in 5th grade. Yeah, because we had just moved from the elementary school to the middle school. I was in class, like, in between classes, and this kid was like, yo, did you hear about this software that you can like make a video game on your computer? And I'm like, you can't use your computer to make video games. You'd have to, I don't know how you make video games, but I couldn't do it. And he's like, no. And like, anyway, we ended up pirating RPG Maker 2000 and I was in 5th grade, and like, so me and my other friend like got really into this for making, like, I immediately tried to start making a Zelda fan game, like right after my first project using the default resources. And like, we're like looking at the little clicky options, and we're like, okay, set a switch. I get that. A switch is on or off. That's like, just have the switch, the door's open. And then it was like, the second function was like set a variable. And I'm like, what's a variable? We look at each other like, I don't know what a variable is, because we hadn't even started algebra at this point.
Right.
So we ended up teaching ourselves what variables were in order to use RPG Maker. And then like, I think like, like later in that year, we started pre-algebra, and they were like doing the thing where like, so this is what an equation is. You have to keep them balanced. And I'm like, we already figured this out.
Fifth grade dropout. No need.
Mm-hmm. And then so we made like a few RPG Maker games on and off through like middle school, and I like made that Majora's Mask. I did a little bit of worked on that for maybe a year or so, and through a little bit in high school, and then largely didn't do anything else until Ocean's Heart.
Gotcha. Okay. It's funny when you mentioned that, I tried to go looking for it. I wasn't sure if it was anything you ever published, and I was reminded that I've been on a mailing list for this website called Zeldix. I made that sound terrible. Zeldix.
I mean, they started out making it sound terrible.
Yeah. And I just remember like how many A Link to the Past ROM hacks I played over the years. And
Yeah.
I just wasn't sure if you had gotten your start doing that or if you just sort of went full force on RPG Maker and like actual engines. But it sounds like that's what you did.
Yeah, pretty much straight from making RPG Maker 2003 games about our classmates and teachers to Ocean's Heart.
Wow. When did you start working on Ocean's Heart?
I believe the early 2017.
And
Because
did
it couldn't have been much longer than because I totally forgot. Someone asked me this, and I'm like, it had to have been not much longer after I bought that RetroPie that I learned about Solaris from. So I like went back way back in the Amazon cart history to figure out when it was. So I got that in early 2017. So it must have been sometime around then.
Did you have the whole idea mapped out, or was it just like, I'm gonna make this little thing as a proof of concept and then move on to something? Like what was that process like?
Yeah, it was much more on the, this will be a little game, sort of get the basics down, proof of concept, just be able for me, and then if it works out well, I'll maybe move on to a real project. And then it spiraled out of control. Ocean's Heart, blocked my microphone. Ocean's Heart was supposed to be like a 1 to 2 hour game with like maybe 3 little dungeons that are connected with an overworld, and that's it.
Is any of that stuff still in the game?
Good question. So, well, I mean, it has been just like a continually iterative process. But so I will say this. I'm not sure if a single, like, I mean, because like it was a smooth circular process of like making this area, making the next area, making the next area, making the next, remaking the first area, remaking the second area, remaking so like they've sort of gotten built on top of each other, like Paleolithic ruins on top of ruins on top of ruins. But
it's in the strata.
I will say, yeah, it is. Every area has like its strata of its previous areas underneath it. So I'm not sure if like as far as like maps, any of the like original stuff that I put in was there. Graphics wise, it's been a lot of the original graphics. I didn't have to redo much of those. But I will say every single thing I've made is still in the game files.
Right.
So if anyone wanted to open it up, even just in the Solaris editor, like you can see all the old areas and warp yourself to them and see how much of it still works.
I might have to do that. That reminds me, way back when, I guess it might have been like 97 or 98, there was an online hunt for the Triforce in Ocarina of Time. And to get it, people were, including myself, were using a Game Shark. And there was this thing called the Beta Quest code where... have you ever used a Game Shark?
One time after a magic class at the community center, I was waiting for my sisters to get out of their class, and a kid with a Game Shark sat next to me and gave me a bunch of Master Balls and Pokemon Crystal.
Yes. Okay.
And that was the last, and then he left, and that was the last I ever saw a Game Shark.
So
but
basically,
I know how they work.
Yeah. So you have
I can't
even remember how many characters it is.
Like code. I was playing I wrote an article about Pokemon Crystal a few weeks ago. So I wanted to play Pokemon Crystal a little bit to refamiliarize myself. And I was like, well, I might as well play like a Fire Red hack that remade Pokemon Crystal.
Right.
And it had like the option in the emulator, there were the Game Shark options.
Okay.
And I was like, oh yeah, please, no random encounters. Like I am just trying to play, up to the ruins of Alph to see them.
So for the this beta quest thing, there was like the initial string, and then there was the 4 variables at the end, like A through F, 0 through 8 or 9 or whatever it was.
Yeah, hex code values.
Yeah, and basically like for this beta quest code, you would leave the initial string the same, but then just change the variables at the end, and you would have, thousands of permutations. And there was maybe like 20 of us on this website that no longer exists. And I was 10 years old doing this. I don't know what was wrong with me, but I spent the summer of 6th grade going to 7th grade or something like that, just logging these hex values and seeing what changed in the game every time. And like weird things would happen. But getting older and understanding how game development works at least a little bit, I know that it's probably just files they left in that you were never supposed to see. old
Yep.
ideas that had no basis in reality and just were never going to be used. Like, can
Mhm.
we make this rock float? Yes, good, scrap it. But oh my god, it's the Triforce. Like, no, it's not. It's just a rock floating in the air. Chill out. Yeah.
Yeah, or like, or those lovely mysterious things. It's like, what is this doing in here? And you're like, I don't know, but if I take it out, everything crashes. Like,
Yeah. Like the initial bag that you get in World of Warcraft. That
is that
that bag is like spaghetti code, famously. Like, they cannot change that bag, otherwise the game breaks. So that's why everybody still has it.
Oh, I love those things.
Yeah. So you mentioned that it was like a circular design process. Did you have all of the areas in your head when you... Actually, let me ask a different question to start this. So you mentioned that it was just supposed to be a small game, few dungeons, overworld connecting it. When did you decide that it would be bigger?
Never. It just sort of happened.
Okay.
I never meant for this to happen.
Wow. That blows up
Ocean Heart is just a terrible accident.
that blows up a lot of questions. I'm just kidding. So
yeah, well,
that's so interesting.
Maybe this will be useful. So I've been using Google Notes for a long time. So let me just scroll back. Just scroll down to the bottom. I'm sure there'll be a very early Ocean's Heart note. Maybe this might be able to shed some light onto the situation.
I like how it's a situation.
Man, yes. I bet in one of these notes there's just going to be a list of like 10 locations. Okay, abilities, swimming. No, that's not in there.
No,
Level 2 lift. No way. Matches.
I kept thinking I was going to find flippers, but I never did.
I mean, it's coded in. It's totally, works in the game, but just like didn't work well for the design. And I eventually was like, oh, you're never going to get these. It is too much. It doesn't do good things for the world design of islands.
Sure. Yeah.
They're islands. They stop being islands if you can swim. Now you just have a bunch of slow, very large areas to traverse that have largely nothing in them.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, here's something good. Locations: chain of shipwrecks, fairy fountains, 4 sea monsters at the edge of the sea shelf related to the central tree. What is that? That's nothing. I don't know what that is.
I feel like that became the lighthouses.
Pirate taverns.
There you go. There's plenty of those.
Yeah. Let's see. You only get places by fairies. Let's see. The MAME character. That's a typo, but it sounds like violence.
I thought you meant the emulator.
Oh.
Just
Yep,
there was machine sprite.
Oh yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah, the plot was largely going to be a lot more Miyazaki full about pollution monsters and having to clear 4 giant pollution monsters in order to restore life to a central tree.
Wow, that's cool. That could be the next game.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I think I have a lot of ideas for next games, so we'll just see which one ends up winning dominance in the fight. So yeah, Ocean's Heart has I don't really have any memory of how it started, apparently.
Okay.
Just looking at that design doc, that's all unfamiliar to me. No memory of this place. Gandalf meme.
When did you make the decision that, and maybe there's no answer to this, but did you make a decision of, okay, this has gotten so big that this is a game that I'm going to sell?
Oh, that is a good decision. I think that too, I'm not sure if there is a specific point or if that sort of like that realization slowly, it would have been like a year or 2 in development.
Okay.
That I think that realization sort of dawned on me that I'm like, as I just kept designing areas and being like, oh, there's some room over here. Let me make a cool little grotto. Oh, it would be cool in this grotto if there was a side quest related to it. Oh, it'd be a cool reward for the side quest if there was a whole new item. And just sort of spiraling out of control with that sort of feature bloat. That I think a couple years in, I was like, this game is like 6 hours long now. This is a whole game.
Yeah.
And then, because like as someone who's never made a game before, even the feasibility of like, how do you sell a game? Like, can you just put it on Steam? Like, how does that work? You know, like that sort of when that research started.
Okay.
And, you know, talking to some of the developers who made the engine and how, like, you know, how feasibility there, chatting with them. I think a couple of years in, I sort of slowly started working towards like, okay, this is going to be a real, not just something for me and my friends and, you know, 10 random people on the internet.
So, I mean, you sort of mentioned this, like, is it possible to just like put a game on Steam? Is it?
I'm gonna be honest, I'm still a little unclear. So after making the decision that like, okay, this is going to be like a, you know, like professional game I'm going to sell. Sure. You know, I was doing research about it and stuff, and I was like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to figure out promotion and taxes. Right. Like, no, I don't want to deal with taxes. What is a publisher for? What does a publisher do? Oh, a publisher does all that? I want a publisher. Right. And then I started pitching and then, you know, I finished the game and started pitching it to publishers because I was like, my logic was like, I'm just going to finish this game. And then I figure if I come with a finished game to publishers, that's not a particularly risky bet, you know, for them.
Sure. They don't have to invest like long-term years of your life. So
yeah, it's like, it's less stress for me because I don't feel like I'm going to let anyone down if I don't finish it, or if it, you know, needs an extra 5 months. I feel like it's probably got to be less stress for them because they don't have to worry about me, you know, burning out or dying or quitting or getting an accident or whatever, like less risky for everybody involved. So, and I, you know, luckily I've got a good support network and I have a professional full-time job that still leaves me with enough mental energy to do this on the side. So because I've got that, like, hey, great.
Okay, cool. So that I was really trying to structure this sort of line of questioning, but I really love like conversational style interviews, so I have no issues with it like circling back on itself. But I wanted to get back into like the actual planning and design of Ocean's Heart. So how do you decide where to put things? Like you have Yarmouth, right, and then next to that is the Puzzlewood, or you have Oakhaven, and then next to that is the monastery. Like how do you design that? Like what was the thought process behind connecting these places together and how it flowed?
So initially things were like the initial plan was to have things way more separate, just sort of like 3 islands and you take ferries to each one. And then I sort of, you know, I was like, what if there are a couple other connections between them? And eventually it was like, okay, what if there's all these things are connected and ferries are just fast travel? So things just sort of, as I built them out, grew more and more connected. And then so there's a couple of different questions here. Is sort of how did everything get connected? Is once it reached sort of a critical mass, I was in my first restructuring of the overworld, because the overworld has been entirely restructured like 1.5 times. And the first time I was doing the first time was the half. I was rearranging things and I was like, you know, let's make it actually logically fit together. Because before that, it was sort of like a bunch of maps and some of them connected, and it wasn't like actually physical. Like things overlapped and you had to go into 4-dimensional space to make sense of it. And once I started making it like, okay, could you pull out each of these maps and paste them together onto a big, you know, onto a big image, would that work? Then I was sort of like, oh, well, there could be a connection here. So let's just make a fun, if it doesn't break anything, that'd be fun if they were connected. That gives you another place to explore. Let's do that.
Interesting.
So then things sort of grew together that way. In terms of like deciding what to put where, like should there be a monastery on Marble Cliff or you know, on a Yarmouth or whatever, like a lot of that is just sort of me, you know, as I'm in the sort of like the concept phase, coming up with idea of what should be in the game at all, just coming up with the ideas. Like all of those are drawn from like, oh, my wife was watching One Piece and I saw an image that looked cool. I'll just do something like that. Or my wife is a huge anime nerd. It's that's where all my One Piece knowledge comes from, like walking through the room. Or like I'm like, oh, the idea of because if there was a flood, then wouldn't it be cool if some things were brought up to a mountaintop to save
Right.
them. Like, where would that fit in? And just sort of getting sort of a, I think the way these come together is I get an image of a cool place in my mind and then build out its immediate surroundings and then sort of connect all of those points into a cohesive whole.
So it's more like you have an idea for something and then you figure out where it fits rather than I need something to fit here.
Yeah, I mean, definitely both.
Okay.
Because I mean, when you do, you've got like a bunch of points of interest of like, oh, cool, I want to have a salt marsh because I think a salt marsh is cool, and I want to have a coniferous forest, and I want to have a mangrove forest, and so like you got your I like plants a lot, so a lot of my points of interest are like habitats.
Yeah, I can tell.
Or like a windmill, or like a chain of shipwrecks. So you've got each of these individual locations, and then you piece them all together in a cohesive way that like a lot of what I did was I went into older Zelda games, especially like Oracle of Seasons, which is that's one of my favorite, or looked at Link to the Past and broke down like, because if you have your critical path of dungeon to dungeon to dungeon to dungeon, how does that loop in on itself and go through the overworld?
Right.
Like each sort of path between nodes is going to be a larger path to the next one or a shorter one, and like breaking all that down. So I sort of use that sort of framework of how the Zelda games do that to connect all these nodes. Like, okay, if we're going to go to this pirate fort and then from there to the shipwreck train and then from there to the sunken palace or whatever, like to go underwater to the Sea King's palace, like how far should each of those be? Like how many hubs should we go back and forth between them? Because you want to build in good opportunities for the player to take a break to do side quests or restock on supplies. When you sort of work all that out and build out this octopus of this Ouroboros octopus of each of its arms eating itself, you've got a bunch of negative space that you haven't filled in yet. So what I do is I find myself like building a marsh here and a village here and a forest here, and then there's a little gap right here in the middle. Like and this is like the exact way there's an area called the Strait of Thorns right between Valewood and the Puzzlewood, and that was just like I made them and then I made them fit together, and I noticed there were about 200 pixels between them, and I'm like, oh well, okay, what's going here? And so like with that extra space, I just sort of filled it in. I'm like, well, okay, here's some extra space. Let's put something cool in.
Yeah, I feel like you were really scaling a mountain in that section, like with the huge statues and all that, and then finding the dude who gives you the fire spear, like, or who does something to your spear. I think he extends it or makes it do more.
Oh, he makes it do more fire.
Yeah. Finding that guy in there, I found him so late. And then that's when I realized, oh, I think that Figano's Isle from the demo is still in this game. Like, how the hell did I get there? Yeah. But finding those little things, you just have like such a knack for developing a world on top of itself and like still allowing you to discover those hidden things and like using layering. I think it's Goat's Head Harbor or maybe one of the other towns really reminds me of Narsh from Final Fantasy VI, where there's like a lot of layering that you're walking underneath, and it feels like a real city that you're just like a very small part of. And I thought that was really neat.
Thanks. Yeah. That was probably Oakhaven. That one's got the most like bridges and upper layers.
Yeah.
It actually, I don't know if it has any bridges. I think none of the towns have bridges. They used to, but they were too much of a hassle and too glitch prone. Let me tell you what, it is hard to make a place where you can go over it and under it.
I bet.
Like you can do multiple layers, but then how do you connect them? And it can feel artificial. Anyway.
Were there any like themes or motifs from other games that you saw and said, I want to do something like that, or I could do that better? Did any of that go into Ocean's Heart?
I mean, that's a good. Now I'm gonna think. Is there anything that I was like, I can do that better? Nothing comes to mind with that. I mean, there are definitely themes and motifs in other games that I was like, I love that. I want to do my own take on that. Okay. I mentioned earlier that like Oakhaven has a lot of aesthetic similarities to Novigrad, because I played The Witcher during development of this, and I'm like, well, this is such a pretty town. I like these houses. Let me draw these houses. And so I tried to get, when I was doing okay, then I was like, just like my wife would walk in and she's being like, I want to watch anime. Are you playing video games? And I'm like, yes. And it's just like a still screen of the buildings in Novigrad, and I'm just drawing them. She's like, you're not playing the game. And I'm like, it's important.
I need to see it living.
Mm-hmm. Or I mean, obviously, a ton of the game has the I was trying to emulate that sense of exploration that's in Zelda games, because it does it so well. I want to play more of that, so I'll make more of that.
So one of the specific things about like chaining things together, I can't remember what town it's in. You'll have to forgive me. I think it might be Ballast Harbor or somewhere. There's like a walkway that you can't actually see, but it leads to a cave opening, and then it leads to, I don't know what that dungeon is called, but it's a completely separate like end game dungeon. Like, did you have an idea for that dungeon and didn't know where to put it, or did you say, I want to put a hidden dungeon in this town? Like, how did that work?
Oh, that one actually that one's just a fun little bonus. So that was one of the so here's what happened is I think I had as I was in development, I had 3 or 4 dungeons made. And then I switched aspect ratios.
Oh wow.
Because the game just Solaris default the games by default are like in a Link to the Past aspect ratio.
Like 4:3.
Yeah. And because the engine was made to power a Link to the Past fan game. And then it was just really powerful, and you can use it for your own original IP too. And it's mostly been used so far. I was looking at the Solaris library the other day, and I think there's like 4 or 5 original games, and then like 12 or so Zelda fan games. So it's been mainly used for Zelda fan games. So that was just like the default aspect ratio was the Link to the Past. And then I was like, it's like 2018. Why am I doing this? So I made it wider, but then that broke all the dungeons because then the screen is wider than all the rooms are. So I had to remake all the dungeons. And I'm like, this is great anyway, because it gave me a chance to redesign them. And the iterative process is the most powerful process to make. You learn from your mistakes. You played them and you tested them out, and you're just like, all right, scrap it all, do it again, but better. It frees you up way more than trying to improve something. Like being able to just tear everything down and rebuild it frees you up and trying to make tweaks to improve something. So there were these original 3 dungeons. That was the Willow Palace is actually what it is that is the original Spruce Head Shrine that I made. And then remade it when I redid the aspect ratio, and I was like, oh, this is a chance to put in new unique graphics for it too. But then I just had it like a fully functional dungeon just laying around, and it wasn't going to be in the game. And then near the end of the game, I was like not engaged in any particularly active development. I was like, maybe this was when I was pitching to publishers and just sort of futzing around doing miscellaneous polish. So I was just like, I could just take away and drop this in somewhere. Like, it doesn't have to be a thing. And so I was like, where is there room for this? And just sort of hit it down there in Ballast Harbor.
Cool.
Redid the graphics and dropped it in as a little bonus dungeon, that's why there's a lot of in that dungeon, there's a lot of those little bomb plants.
Yes.
And there's a lot of little bomb plants right east of Goat's Head Harbor, the main town, because like those were supposed to teach you how to use them for the first dungeon, and then I redid the first dungeon and forgot about them.
Oh, yeah. I mean, those plants were used pretty sparingly, actually.
Yeah, they're originally going to be... well, the reason for that is... goes back to... okay, so there's one thing that I hate making, and that's menus. I cannot stand to make menus. Just like the abstractness of it is hard for me to conceptualize, and I think it's tedious. So like the original game, and this is when it was going to be smaller, you were only supposed to ever get the sword, bows, and bombs. And that's because I've got 3 buttons. And I don't want to make an inventory. It's a hassle. It's hard. So if you've got 3 buttons, I'm going to give you 3 items. So it's like bombs were going to be, like 1/3 of your items. So I wanted to like, lean you into them, like you use the bomb flowers first, and then you get a bow, and then you get bombs, and it unchains you from having to depend on bomb flowers, and then the game's over. But then this other developer who helped me out with a few things, Lamazing,
Mhm.
who's the other developer in the credits, was like, you can make an inventory menu. And I'm like, I don't want to. Lamazing's like, you can make an inventory menu. You should make an inventory. And I was like, fine. And Lamazing believed in me and convinced me to like branch out and be capable and from my mistakes, and encouraged me. So I did that. And then I made as many items as I could fit on the screen.
Wow. Did you intend for? I mean, speaking of the menu, like there's a lot of. I mentioned this before, but I finished the game without finding many things. I actually finished Sprucehead's Peak without actually finding the barrier item.
Yeah.
I had no idea that dungeon was any longer until I went looking for the entrance to Fikanos Isle. I combed that game so hard. And then I was like, oh shit. And then I saw the achievement. You could just like finish the game without ever going here. So
yeah.
Did you intend for there to be a lot of optional content, or for sort of like, I don't want to say the majority of the game to be optional, but like it's almost 50-50.
I think actually the majority of the game is optional. So they're like, just judging by, for one thing, judging by like in the Steam reviews, the play times people will be like, oh yeah, it's like a 6 to 8 hour game. And the other people are like, it's a 17 to 20 hour game. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. I think it turns out I made most of this game optional.
Let me check mine right now.
7 main quests and 32 side quests.
Yeah, mine was. I mean, I've gone back to just record some stuff, but 20.8 hours, and I'm only missing 2 achievements. I somehow can't make it from Oakhaven to Goat's Head in under 1:07, and I think the one of the side quests was bugged the last time I played. So
yeah, the side quests achievement did have a bug in it. That was honestly me being bad at math and getting confused. It turns out the only way to complete that is to make sure you side with that Phantom Squid quest. I don't know if you did that one. You side with Aster to help him take down the Merchants Guild in Goat's Head.
Yeah.
And then you complete all of the side quests but one. You need to complete 32 out of 33 side quests and then finish the game. Then you'll unlock every side quest achievement.
Oh my god!
The reason why is because I was oh my god, I have a variable gets set if you don't kill him, because you have the choice in that side quest, like, do you side with him or do you fight him to bring him in? Because you're initially tasked with like bringing him in because he's like like a like thief messing up with the merchants. And so the merchants hire you to capture him or take him out. So I set a variable of Aster not killed, and then I was like, okay, so if you don't kill him, then there's one extra side quest of like going further in that quest chain.
Yeah.
But then I was like, okay, well, if you have not chosen, if the didn't kill Aster variable is not set, then you don't have 33 quests. And then is like a triple or quadruple negative or something. And I just confused myself and did the math wrong and subtracted from total quests instead of completed quest or something. Anyway.
Oh my god. The woes of
game
development.
Me being a dummy.
So on that same vein of optional stuff, so you had mentioned in a previous interview that your wife was making a guide for the game, and I think oddly enough I might have interacted with her on the Steam forum when
maybe so.
Anybody who buys this game now will not run into this bug, but like during the review process you couldn't finish it. Like you would kill the final boss or the second to last boss, and then it wouldn't trigger the final boss. So I think I posted on the forum being like, am I doing something wrong here, or like is something broken? And then somebody replied like right away, like, hey, I told the developer about this, and I was like, okay, that sounds like a pretty close connection. Maybe it's actually the developer, but I figured it's your wife. But anyway, you mentioned that she's making a guide for the game, and I was wondering if during the development process, when you're thinking of all these optional things, are you ever sort of like dastardly in the Souls like aspect of like, oh, no one's gonna find this and that's totally fine, or do you sort of want people to figure it out? Or do you want people to like only be able to figure it out if they have help?
No. So what I want is absolutely that dastardly Souls like. I want someone to be playing this 5 years and find something no one else has found. and I was not even like, I was kind of lukewarm about there being a guide at all,
Sure.
especially for some of the optional stuff. So like way I went to that most is did you ever go into the Abyss?
Yeah, I did all that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you probably noticed like how that is very hidden.
Mm-hmm.
So to get down to like there's like the things you need to finish that quest are you need to go into the final dungeon, into an optional room, and get a key from there, and then leave there. Don't the game wraps up there. You have to go back out to the rest of the game.
Yeah.
You have to go underneath Oak Haven to the secret lake. In the secret lake, there's 3 entrances. One of them takes you to a little mini boss, tough enemy. You fight him, you get some coral ore. But behind that, there is a hidden bombable wall.
Yeah. Somebody actually told me about this on the Steam forum. I didn't find this myself.
Yeah. And I don't know that anyone found this themselves, honestly, which, I mean, because that was my plan. I didn't want anyone to find it.
Oh.
And then if you do the second bombable wall, then you get into deeper tunnels, which can lead you down to the Abyss. And you can get down there, but there's really nothing there unless you have that key from the final dungeon, and you go to the palace, and this all ties into what the Sea King was doing and like how he got his powers, and that there's more to his mythos than his sort of propaganda and like,
Sure.
Like all of that. I think a really fascinating thing, and maybe some of this comes from studying architecture or whatever, but like games all the time will do that thing where they build statues. There's statues that tell you about the story of the people, and they almost never lie, which is weird because like all the statues in real life are just propaganda and lies from trying to convince someone of a narrative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, sure, we have statues that are like, oh yeah, this actually happened, but like someone had to think it was important enough. And I mean, we have tons of statues. I mean, look at like like the Confederates monuments, or like they have their tiny little Mount Rushmore of Confederate generals, and trying to rewrite history with those. Like that is actually fascinating. I think it's something that games don't necessarily do a lot. But like, so anyway, all of the side quests is really just trying to hint at that there is more to the story than the power of the Sea King has wanted there to be told. Anyway, so yeah, I didn't want anyone to find this because I thought it would be way more fun if someone found this in a year or whatever. But I do think it was still possible to find, because there's another area. So I'm going to do hand motions, which is probably not great for a podcast.
No, it's a video. Don't worry.
But like, because the secret area is like the place you need to bomb to get into it is like, say if it's right here, just off to the side, there's another area, and you can see behind the bombable wall area that sort of hints like, oh, I haven't been there, but I can see that there is space there. Nowhere else in the game can I see like a traversable space that I haven't gotten to. So I feel like it was like, I'm hiding this pretty harshly, because the best way to hide something is with a secret in front of it. Like the in Dark Souls, that big tree, the Hollow Basin.
Yes, the Great Hollow.
Yeah, like that is the best hidden. I was following guides for Dark Souls because I was pretty pissed off at it. But like
that, I mean, as a walkthrough maker, that's music to my ears. That's fun.
Yeah, but like the fact that like that whole area is hidden there, like the secret, you can find that the initial illusion wall, you break it down, and there's a chest, and boom, that tells you you're done with the secret. But there's another secret behind that. Like hiding a secret behind a reward is the best way to hide something, because you tell people there's nothing else here. It's like,
what's funny?
Direction. It's magician shit.
In Demon Souls, even on the PS3 version, the original version of the game, there's only 2 illusory walls, I think, in the entire game. They added a third in the remake for like a big Easter egg, but the illusory walls in Demon Souls shimmer. So, I mean, if you're just walking past it, you will not notice that a wall is shimmering. And the illusory walls, there's 3 now that I'm thinking about it, and then they added a 4th, but they're not necessarily like ultra hidden. Like there's like an archway that just appears to be bricked up, and it's like, okay, maybe I could break this or something. But in Dark Souls, they removed that shimmering, so it just looks like a wall, which made it even worse. And I'm proud of myself to say, like, I found the Great Hollow just on my own, because by the time I found that first chest, I had been so conditioned to be afraid of mimic chests that I hit the chest, and I was using a pretty long weapon, and it broke the wall behind it.
I feel like that's a good point too. That's probably somewhat intentional, that they were like how I made it so you could see the area from another area,
right?
Because like you do have to do something that's fair to be
of
like,
course.
And I feel like they have very much conditioned you at that point to be afraid of mimic chests. I wouldn't have got it because once I knew there were mimic chests, I like visually scanned every chest, and like I actually noticed immediately like the chain bends in a different way if they're mimic chests, and I was like, oh, okay, I can just tell now. So I'd never I would look at the chain and be like, oh no, it's fine, and open it like a normal human.
Yeah, they also breathe if you wait a long time, which is just unsettling. Yeah, like you see the teeth and it sort of opens up. You got to stand there for a little while. Who's just gonna stand and stare at scenery for 30 seconds? What's interesting though is that, like, I mean, now we're getting on a Dark Souls tangent, but I can't help myself. Like, finding the Great Hollow, like at that point there are no mimic chests. If you're just doing it in a linear fashion where you fight the gargoyles, ring the first bell, go down to Blighttown, because the first mimic is not until Sen's Fortress. So I feel like I must have found it on like a return trip to Blighttown where I was just going through the swamp trying to pick everything up. But it is extraordinarily, it's like one of the most hidden things in video games. Like for such a big area with the ancient dragon underneath it, it's like, it's just crazy.
I was a little bit disappointed with what's at the bottom, but
I mean,
join a covenant, and I'm like, I don't have online.
You know what's funny? You mentioned that your secret is visible. Ash Lake is visible in the game.
Really?
But it's not. If Dark Souls was 2D, it would be more obvious. But like if you're in Tomb of the Giants, where like before you go to fight Nito, you're like on a cliff. You're overlooking Ash Lake. It's much more of like hey, isn't this neat? Less than hey, this is a huge fucking secret. Like
it has no indication that is a traversable space from that angle, but
not at all.
But I do remember that. I didn't go to I didn't go to that part of Blighttown on my first until I was way later in the game, actually, though, because fuck Blighttown. It's Miyazaki and your poison swamps, like, buddy.
I played a Dark Souls overhaul mod recently called Daughters of Ash, and it's wonderful, but I played an early version of it that had a lot of bugs, and unfortunately the rusted iron ring, which lets you like traverse swamps and the tar pits with no problem, it like didn't drop. And I just figured, they removed it to be assholes. Then I like read the patch notes like a few weeks later, like, we fixed the rusted iron ring bug. I was like, fuck! It made everything so much easier, because the swamp in that iteration of Dark Souls in that mod is just even worse.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, I have a few more questions if you still have time. I know we're like way over the.
Oh yeah, no, I'm chill. I've got nothing else going on,
man. Okay, so I wanted to gush about the music for a bit.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, it's unbelievable. Like Oakhaven made me stop. Like I stopped playing for like 5 minutes just to listen to that song for a while. And I like tweeted about it once like the preview window was open. I was like, people need to hear this. So I also found your SoundCloud while researching, which has I don't know if there's a track called Ocean's Heart. I don't know if it's actually in the game.
No, that's the question.
It may be, or maybe you iterated on it. It sounded familiar, but it could have just been the instrumentation was similar.
Yeah, I used a lot of the same instruments throughout the whole track, or throughout the whole soundtrack for cohesion.
Do you have a musical background? Because I mean, for one person to build this game and finish it and make it just chock full of secrets and areas, and like for one person to do that, and I know you said Lamazing helped out as well, but really for one person to do that, it's very impressive.
Yeah. Lamazing, thank you. Yeah, Lamazing did I think the quest log menu, all amazing.
Okay.
And the map, that was amazing. And I mean, like, what I asked, there's a Discord that I ask questions on about coding, and we help each other out. But
it's never a one person process.
Yeah, But yeah, musical background. I've been playing music since like 5th grade. I got a bass guitar in 5th grade, and it was
Okay.
like, oh sweet, now I can play along with like Van Halen and Shinedown and like and then I've been doing music and whatever various instruments ever since. So yeah, I love playing music. I do audio engineering stuff. Do the sound stuff at my church.
Okay.
Uh and yeah, doing a lot of live music. Yes.
Is there any possibility of the soundtrack getting released at all, even if it's just on your SoundCloud?
Yes. Yeah, I don't think we've announced it yet. But yeah, we are planning to do that.
Oh, sick. Great. Exclusive news here.
Yeah.
I will, that'll be a day one purchase for sure. I legit like left it open for a while just to listen to it.
Thanks.
It's so good. And
yeah,
it reminds me a lot of like Final Fantasy X, where like you use instrumentation that matches. It's not just like background music. It's like, this is an archipelago, so we should really only use instruments that you might find in an archipelago or sound like an archipelago. So
yeah, that's what I was going for.
Yeah, great job.
Yeah,
you nailed it.
A little bit of with a little bit more of a modern take thing, because like the boring like here's an orchestral score is, I mean, fine and great in a lot of cases, but I wanted to be a bit more quirky and a lot more percussive.
Yeah. Do you think that this, I don't know how much you know about this sort of part of the development of games, but like, it sounds like it belongs on an SNES or a Genesis, but like, it kind of clearly can't. Like, it's way too complex and like clear sounding, but do you know like if this could have been possible to do on like original hardware or anything like that? Like, are you familiar with that at all?
So the SNES could do samples. Okay. So pretty much you can play any sound on an SNES. Like from what I understand of these things. So like on an older systems, like, or systems that use a sound chip that doesn't do samples, you absolutely could not have this kind of soundtrack. It's very heavily sample based.
Okay.
And percussion especially. But so like the NES, no way, or the Game Boy, maybe the SNES. I think the big limiting thing there is just like file size. Sure. Like a lot of these tracks are like 3 minutes long, which like in 90s terms is, you can't fit that on a cartridge,
right?
Like I think a lot of the like a wave file is probably bigger than Ocarina of Time.
Yeah. I mean, Ocarina of Time I think is like 32 megabytes or like 24.
Yeah.
Like, it's so small. It's crazy. It's unbelievable how small it is. But
yeah. So yeah, that would probably be the main limiting factor for sure.
Okay. Well, I mean, you did a great job of like making it sound like it belonged in the era while also being updated. It just hits a certain weird middle ground that's just amazing, really. So great job.
It was fun to do. A lot of the percussion is samples that me and my friend went outside my apartment when I lived in the city, just like into the alleys, and found a bunch of trash and like banged it together and like knocked stuff up on walls and like that kind of stuff. And I just recorded it on my phone, and I've been using those as samples ever since. And a lot of those, like, I think some of the like dings and some of the percussion is just like a bottle of Rex Goliath that I found on the side of the road, fire hydrant.
Me stepping on cigarette butts is the main theme.
There's a lot of, I think a part of like a lot of the rock guy throw sound effects or something is just like my friend jumping on some gravel.
Okay. Yeah. You should do a making of.
That'd be fun.
Were there any features that you wanted to put in? I mean, you mentioned the flippers before and swimming, but is there anything that you wanted to implement but didn't? Or was there anything in the game that you had implemented that you removed?
Yeah, had implemented and removed. The swimming mechanic is probably the biggest one. That went a decent ways into development, where it's like 4 or 5 dungeons in, you get the swimming ability, and it can go anywhere. And it's like, what it turns out being is like a lot of water is not actually interesting to swim across in a 2D game.
You like, get the Wind Waker problem.
Yeah, exactly. So eventually it was just like, well, the water works better, is more fun as an obstacle than as a path. So goodbye swimming. It's still, if you go into the debug room, you can just pick up the item still. But there are a couple other. I think there was another spell you can get. Like there was a fire spell that I think I just didn't literally physically didn't have root pixels, like enough room in the inventory to have it. So it just no, you just don't get that. There was a level 2 like because you get like the ability to lift rocks. There was like a stronger ability for that, which that's just kind of a boring thing to get, so I took it out.
It's always a disappointing upgrade to get.
Yeah, and it's a very easy way to gate things off. So I get why it does exist in a lot of games, but like come up with a better way to gate things off, man. If you really need to gate things off.
In Ocarina of Time, you get the gold gauntlets, and you use them twice, like 2 times, and they're in both in the Ganon's Tower area, and it's like I've been staring at this obelisk that I knew I could lift at some point, and that's it, like twice, like yeah. Anything that you wanted to put in?
Well, so there was a lot of things that like I could have just kept doing, but needed to stop at some point. Like side quests. Like eventually you got to pull the plug and be like, stop making these things, man. Eventually too, because like eventually you run out of interesting rewards to give to people. Like I think ideally people go beyond this in plenty of games, but the cap to your side quests, the amount of side quests you have, should be your amount of interesting rewards. I think I probably went a bit over that. There's a lot of like side quests where you go and you get another piece of coral ore at the end. And there's a bit of a balancing act there of like, you don't want to force players to do all the side content to get to a reasonable level to do the main content. Like if your upgrades are gated behind side quests, which encourages doing the side quests, and I think it's a good system, you can't require someone to do a bunch of things that are side content to keep pace with the main game. But then you want people to be able to do some of them and be competitive, but like at a good level. But then you don't know which ones they're going to do, so you sort of have to put the things you need in you have to put the things you need to be at a good level in multiple places. But then how do you balance that with, well, if you do all of them, then how do you not get overpowered? My solution for that was like, maybe not the most elegant, but this is my first game. I added a hard mode in the Cursed Temple where you can go and just like activate the curse, and that makes enemies harder and that you take more damage. It messes with the amount of iframes after you get hit, that kind of stuff. So ideally you want once you've run out of interesting words to give out, that sort of caps your side quests. But I would have loved to have just kept making them forever, because telling more stories. And there weren't as many like branching side quests as I wanted there to be, where you had choices to make at the end. I think there was like a couple of them maybe, and then a number of side quests that you could do out of order. But I would have liked to have explored that more, but I have to call it quits sometime to finish the game.
Sure. All right, so wrapping up, just 2 final questions. I know a patch is on the way for I think controller remapping and some bug fixes and Japanese localization. Are there any plans after that, or is you're just going to maybe fix some more bugs? I guess my question is there any additional content coming to Ocean's Heart in the near future? Yeah.
So my chair is squeaky. I
thought my
dog. Okay, I thought my dog was whining or something. There will be a patch really soon, which fixes a couple. There's like one major bug and a number of smaller bugs, and adds controller revamping. Because those are things people want most. Is mapping the nonsense controls. Dude, I don't know how the start like the pause ended up on the left shoulder. Like,
I thought it was weird hitting L1 to bring up the menu.
Like literally, like I played the game, pauses on the pause button, I put it on Steam, now it's on the left bumper. I don't know what happened. So I have no idea. But the controller API in Solaris is lacking a few critical things. It uses a slightly older API, and the buttons come in however the controller sends them, so they're not standardized. So like, you know, button 4 on the PlayStation, or like button 6 on the PlayStation is the start button, but that's like the right push the stick in on Xbox. So like there was no way
Right.
to standardize it, or else the controls would be garbage on one controller and fine on another.
Yeah.
So I had to go with some default things that ended up getting weirded out by Steam. Anyway, because controller remapping is big, I think that's a usability thing. So that's going in. The Japanese localization is a bigger ongoing project, so that won't be out in this patch. But anyway, yeah. So for content updates, I don't currently have any plans to, but it's not something I've ruled out.
Okay.
Honestly, one of like the thing I mentioned with side quests is like I'd have to. I think the biggest thing for me for that would be to find an interesting reward.
Mm-hmm.
So that would probably I'd probably have to play around with finding a good mechanic that changed gameplay in a meaningful way, whether this is a new item or an upgrade to an existing item that sort of like felt unique and new, but doesn't unbalance the game or isn't redundant or that kind of thing. So I don't really have any ideas for what a good reward for more content would be. So that would be the first goal to sort of accomplish, the first obstacle to surmount before DLC could be envisioned. I also I don't know how DLC works, honestly. Do you download part of the game? I don't know.
I have no idea.
How does that work? Yeah.
So finally, go ahead.
But other things I'm working on are one, like I've got a little bit of a side project where I'm making a bunch of free resources of like graphics and code and sound effects and stuff to put out just like totally free for everyone to use. Because I want there to be more games. So that's sort of like my side, just like when I'm not busy with something, let me just make a new area, like make a new biome. How about some desert stuff?
It's a noble effort.
Nice. I want to play more games.
So my final question is, we've mentioned like next game a few times, and I don't want to like create like pressure or anything, but like, do you plan on continuing with game development, or is this just sort of going to be like a Finding Forrester, one game I'm done, never again? Like, what's sort of the plan for you going forward?
I do see myself making more games in the future for sure. I think Ocean's Heart, like I'm very happy with it as a first game. And I've learned so much that like I want to put those lessons to use. So I did do as you've mentioned, I've done a couple side projects since Ocean's Heart, which came out before Ocean's Heart, which is weird.
You took a break from game development to do more game development.
Yes. Well, yeah, like I had finished Ocean's Heart and it was just like doing miscellaneous polishing, and then was waiting on QA. And during the QA period, I made Yarntown, and then I took a break for Halloween to make Hallows Eve. And both of those were released before January when Ocean's Heart came out, which was a bit weird. But yeah, so like I like the lessons I learned from Ocean's Heart, I was able to apply to those, and the code I had in Ocean's Heart, I was able, a lot of it, copy and paste. Now it sped up the process so much. So like I have built all these tools and knowledge throughout this process, and it's sort of like, well, I mean, I just built a very good hammer and saw, and I'm not going to make some benches. Like, yeah. So there's a little bit of that. And, just like, I really enjoyed making this game. It was a lot of fun. So it's a fun hobby. My manager at work keeps asking me, because I work like in IT and software development and like a big company. And he's being like, so are you going to like go do game development full time? And I'm like, absolutely not. No way. There's the benefits are awful, the hours are shit, the pay is terrible. But like as a hobby, tons of fun. So right. I've got other ideas that I think would be fun to explore. So we'll see.
Cool. Well, Max, thank you so much for taking the last couple hours to talk with me. This was great.
Yeah. Tons of fun. I love talking about myself.
I mean, who doesn't?
Right.
All right. Anything you want to plug? I mean, anything?
Yeah. I have this game out called Ocean's Heart. Yeah. Just like, this game Ocean's Heart, and then Yarntown, one of my other games, is totally free. So like, no, it's still out there on itch.io, and my Halloween game, Hallows Eve, is out of season, but hey, maybe next autumn. It's just a few bucks.
Has anybody from Software or Sony like reached out to you because of Yarntown?
No. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
I know. That's good and bad.
Yeah.
At least they're not like Nintendo where they just shut it down the day you release it.
Yeah. Well, Yarntown's an interesting case too, because like Nintendo is within their rights to all the things that people do are using their IP explicitly. Absolutely. Like they're using their graphics and their characters. Yarntown, I am not saying like, oh, this is fine. Like this is, yes, an homage. This is recreating, you know, the layout and progression and ideas of Bloodborne. I think technically it doesn't use any IP though. Like, because you can't copyright a game mechanic. Although Warner Brothers just did it
with the Nemesis system.
I don't like that. I don't know how they did that or what that means. But like, you know, the idea of like a corpse run of like, you know, you die, you have to go back to get all your souls. Like, you know, From Software didn't come up with that. Like, you know, and I didn't come up with these ideas either. We're all building on each other. So I mean, I'm not saying that like for what, the game is free and I don't accept donations on it because that's a bad look. Sure. But I don't think there's actually like that's not respectful, and that's more why I'm doing it. But I don't, rather than like legal concerns. But I don't think technically that they could be like, you can't have this upline.
Yeah, I had expected them to maybe reach out and say like, "Hey, great job" or something. Like, I love that. I mean, From has like a Dark Souls itself, like on PC, has an unbelievable modding community, and people are creating their own games. And Namco, who I guess owns the rights to Dark Souls, and like From, like they don't do anything about it. Like they're not promoting it, but like I cannot recall a single time a Souls mod got shut down. So. I think Nintendo seems like pretty much the only people that do the DCMS. They're aggressive with it. It's a little scary sometimes. We spoke about Zeldix before, and there's this 2D Ocarina of Time project that's been on and off for the better part of a decade, or maybe even 2 decades. Oh my gosh! Yeah, I feel like eternally, as long as there are kids learning that video games can be made on their own, there will be Ocarina of Time 2Ds, and none of them will ever be finished. And I think Nintendo shut that down a couple times. It's just like changed hands, and then one day I get an email like, "Hey, this is back. Me and my brother are doing it." And it's like, good luck. We'll never see it. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I was on this website in like, you know, junior high and high school called Zelda Fan Game Central. And that was I think there were like 3 Ocarina of Time 2Ds that I saw go through there in my few years. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like one of them might have been featured in EGM at some point. I feel like that's how I first heard about it. Well, anyway, Max, thank you so much. This was great. Really appreciate you taking the time, and I wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors, because I think you have a really bright future in what you're doing. Aw, thanks. Good luck editing this down to be listenable. It was absolutely delightful to talk to you too, man. Yeah, thanks, Max.